Rick Santorum and the Bukakke Crusade. It was a blissful morning in the Republican state of Florida, Carolina, in which every waking soul was declaring to the skies the glory and wisdom of the Creator, Mel Gibson. Every man, woman, and child who awoke, and had not yet begun their daily worship, would be risen from slumber by the solemn chanting of their neighboring Republican Baptists. Thank you, Lord, for this day. May I and all my colleagues suppress and destroy the homosexual, Jewish, democratic, atheistic, evolutionist, Prius-owning agenda of the heathens of this country. In one solemn, Gibson-fearing home of this quiet little town, in this quiet, only when not threatened by the neighboring atheistic, evolutionist, democratic, pinko-communistic states and were not forced to take action upon them by raping and pillaging their homes, state, there awoke a former presidential candidate, his glistening morning stiffy catching a cool breeze from an open window. This former presidential candidate was none other than the gloriously exalted leader of the Baptist Republican state of Florida, Carolina, Rick Bukakke Santorum. After allowing the refreshing morning air to stimulate his erection, Rick Santorum searched through his closet for appropriate apparel. However, immediately upon pulling backwards on the handle of his closet, a fairly heavy-set man, who had a burlap sack around his head, ran out of the closet with his hands tied and his mouth gagged. "Sweet merciful Gibson, who are you and what were you doing in my closet?" Due to the man still being gagged and bound, Rick Santorum sliced away the restraints that held the man's tongue, but not those that held his hands. He then removed the burlap sack from the stranger's face. The man revealed himself to be the critically acclaimed and wise beyond comparison Rush Limbaugh, who appeared to be sweating tremendously due to not ingesting a premium quality third pounder from McDonald's in over 4 hours. "I'm not rightly sure how I got here, I swear. I woke up here with absolutely no recollection of previous events. You must believe me." Rick Santorum nodded to Rush, demonstrating his belief in him. Unfortunately for Rush, Rick Santorum had a very specific schedule to follow. Every morning when he awoke, he would manually stimulate his still-throbbing erection and ejaculate into his own mouth. However, too much time had passed for this to be possible without excluding some other equally important aspect of his day. Therefore, Rick would have to make haste with what he had. Without another word to Rush, who was still bound by rope on the floor, Rick thrust his towering monolith of cock into Rush's anus, not bothering to remove his clothing, as there would be no time for that. Rick's gargantuan member propelled itself forward at such a tremendous velocity that it tore all the way through Rush's XXL Dockers and boxer briefs, shredding every strand of fabric on its way to his anal cavity. Rick's penis slid surprisingly comfortably into Rush's gaping asshole, and began to slide itself in and out, stimulating both Rush and Rick. Rush was at first horrified by Rick's actions, but slowly began to enjoy the current proceedings more and more. Rick was now entering and withdrawing from Rush's anus in such quick succession that a small fire started on Rick's one-eyed wonder weasel due to an immense amount of friction. Rush let out a blood-curdling shriek, his anus now not only bleeding and slowly having itself torn apart upon each insertion and withdrawal, but now also receiving first, second, and eventually third-degree burns. Rick was feeling so much pleasure from both the intercourse and the burning that he reached into his anus for his sex toy, a miniature genetically engineered gay dolphin. He then awoke the dolphin by tapping it on the nose and instructed it to send a cooling jolt of sperm to his penis to avoid causing skin damage. The dolphin obliged and crawled back into Rick's anus to pleasure him. Rick continued ramming his enormous cock into Rush's anal chasm for around 30 more minutes before he decided it was time for a change of pace. He flipped Rush around so that his mouth was at perfect elevation with his skeeved serpent. Rick then thrust into Rush's mouth with the same force as he had applied to his anus. Unfortunately for Rush yet again, without the layers of fabric to slow the penis, Rick's pudding cannon erupted through the back of Rush's mouth, brainstem, and back of his neck in a cacophony of pre-cum blood and gray matter. Rick was too aroused to stop now. He continued to penetrate the new hole that had been made through Rush's mouth and neck until he finally reached a high enough level of stimulation that he burrowed his giant solid snake into Rush's throat and released a massive surge of bukkake, equivalent in force to the Hoover Dam. This bukkake shredded through Rush's intestines and spurted violently out of his asshole, drenching the entire room in a glorious bukkake fecal fondue. Rick let out a sigh of relief that his schedule had been maintained and ordered his Dave Chappelle, to clean up the semen and body. Rick then strolled out into the streets of his cozy town, happy and joyful. However, this joy would not last long. Mere moments after Rick had stepped out into the crisp morning air, he heard the roar of what sounded like an engine overhead. He looked up to see an airplane above him. He was at first dismissive of the plane. However, upon closer observation, he deduced that the plane was manufactured by the Jesuits due to its phallic shape and decor all along the craft. He saw the bomb bay doors of the plane open and saw a phallic symbol fall from it. Rick was horrified and knew exactly what this meant. Rick ran to his house, grabbed his megaphone, and shouted, with as much volume as possible, "Bukakke! The Jesuits are attacking! Bukakke!" He then ran to his Bukakke-proof bunker, which he had installed as per the instructing of Gale, the primary target of the Jesuits. Rick was also one of Gale's men who had remained fairly secretive of that fact to avoid the horror of the Jesuit homosexual compound located in San Francisco, California. Upon sealing his Bukakke-proof bunker, Rick Santorum immediately ran to his telegraph to send a message to Gale. The message read as follows: "My dearest Gale, the Jesuits have done it again. They have dropped another Bukakke, this time on the state capital of Alatexa, Florida, Carolina, Westboro Baptist Town. Please send some sort of help to our town at once. Gibson have mercy on all our souls."